In this video, I'll be taking a look to see if the battery on the OnePlus Nord CE5 with the 5200 mAh battery, which is sold in markets in the EU, can be upgraded to the 7100 mAh battery, which is found in the OnePlus Nord CE5, sold in India as well as the rest of the global markets. I'll also go over some general information on upgrading batteries in smartphones, and if it's possible to do so. So if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell so you'll be notified once I upload a new video. Alright, so as I already mentioned, I got two OnePlus Nord CE5 smartphones. Both are the same identical phone, but the one which is sold in the EU has a smaller 5200 mAh battery compared to the one which is sold in the rest of the world, which has the larger capacity of 7100 mAh. You may be asking why. Why would they make a smaller battery version and sell that one in the EU when they already have a larger capacity version which is identical? Well, the main reason is the shipping regulations in the EU, which are more strict and limit the total capacity and battery types which can be imported and so forth. The EU isn't the only place where batteries are regulated or restricted. Australia, for example, also has tight regulations on the import and export of items which contain batteries and requires lithium batteries to be shipped only under certain conditions. Another reason why the same exact phone, which is sold in one part of the world, may differ both in battery capacity as well as other internal hardware specifications, would be the market demand and requirements that people have in select markets versus the other. So for example, if in one part of the world where the majority of the people don't want to spend additional money on a phone which has the top of the line processor and care more for battery life or capacity, you will notice the same model phone being sold there with a slightly less powerful processor, as well as possibly less RAM and storage, but with a higher battery capacity, which would lower the total cost of the device, making it more affordable. All these decisions come into consideration, both with the manufacturer, as well as the carrier or network operator demand in each market. Okay, so on to the battery upgrade. Generally on smartphones, are battery upgrades possible? The answer is yes and no. First thing, when it comes to the possibility of upgrading the battery to a higher capacity, will come down to the battery connector type and connector location. The battery which is planned to be used needs to have the same connector type to be able to connect with the connector located on the motherboard, as well as have the flex cable configuration or location in the same area as the previous battery, so you would be able to connect it to the main board. If the connector type is different, or the location of the connector is different, not allowing the cable to reach or connect, then it would not be possible to do. Yes, for some with proper soldering knowledge, the flex cable assembly can be desoldered and removed from one battery and installed with the other, solving the connector type or location issue, but again, this isn't something the vast majority of people would be able to do. So say the connector is the same as well as the location. Next comes the issue of the size of the battery compartment. If the battery itself is larger due to the capacity of the battery, it'll probably not fit in the battery compartment of the phone, requiring modification to the back cover or housing of the phone to allow the battery to fit. In most cases, this means cutting a cutout in the back cover of the phone, as well as dremeling or cutting portions of the side walls of the midframe where the battery will be seated into. However, different battery types can offer higher capacity in the same form factor and size as the current battery. For example, now with these newer silicon carbon incorporated batteries, where they use a certain amount of silicon carbon material inside the battery to achieve a higher capacity, not requiring the physical side of the battery to necessarily increase. So if you have a standard lithium-ion battery at say 5000 mAh and want to upgrade it and find a 7000 mAh battery, which is a silicon carbon incorporated lithium-ion battery, chances are that the battery physical size on the higher capacity battery will allow it to fit in the battery compartment without the need of hardware modifications. Now, let's say the connector type is the same, the connector location matches that of the flex cable orientation, and the compartment can fit the larger capacity battery. You still have to consider the fact of the software on the phone reading the battery properly and working with it. On some phones I've tested in the past, the phone will pick up the larger battery without issues and work fine, where on others, the software would detect a different battery and not communicate properly with the battery chip, or not allow a different battery to be used in general. In those cases where it's software locked or blocked, or the software just can't read the newer battery properly, you'll either get a question mark where the battery charge level is on the phone, or if the phone is not plugged into a charger, the phone will not power on with just the battery connected. There are also times where the phone may detect and work with a newer larger capacity battery, but still show the same capacity as the previous battery in the settings. Now, one perfect example of when a different battery worked properly was with the Motorola Droid Razr and Razr Max. You were able to take the larger capacity battery from the Razr Max and place it in the Droid Razr, and the software would automatically pick up the higher capacity battery, as well as update the model name on the phone software to show that it's a Droid Razr Max. This showed that not only was the software programmed to detect and work properly with a larger battery, it wasn't restricted or locked out, and would adjust the capacity shown and the model of the device. Not only that, you're able to purchase the larger back housing and battery door cover, which is made for the Max, and use it with the standard Droid Razr, essentially doing a proper battery upgrade. So if all that I mentioned thus far worked out, the next issue you may run into will be charging speeds. In many cases, the subboard or charger port board will have charging regulators and chips for fast charging if it's not directly incorporated with the main board. So this may cause a charging port not to work properly with the higher advertised charging speeds with a different battery type or capacity, thus resulting in slower charging and even not charging at all in some rare cases. Bottom line, upgrading the battery in smartphones is almost always not a simple or possible thing to do. 90% of the time, it will either not be possible or not be worth it to do. Looking at phones like this Nord CE5, which are identical in design aside from the battery capacity, chances are high of upgrading the battery and having it work properly, since the higher capacity battery is made to work with the device or vice versa. So looking at these two side by side, we can see that the internal layout is identical. Taking a closer look at the batteries, we see the one on the left, which is sold in the EU, has a model name of BLPD21, versus the one on the right, which is sold in the rest of the markets, has a model of BLPC33. The capacity on the one on the left is 5,200 mAh, compared to the one on the right, which is 7,100 mAh. Now what's interesting is usually on these smartphone batteries, we do tend to see a typical capacity as well as a rated capacity. However, on this one, which is sold in the EU, is only labeled with the rated capacity. But we do also see with the one on the left has a rated capacity of 19.82 watt-hours, versus the one on the right has a rated capacity of 27.17 watt-hours. As for the typical capacity, it's 27.84 watt-hours on the one on the right. There are also differences in charge voltage and nominal voltage. But as far as the physical size of the batteries, they look to be the same. We'll take a closer look at that shortly. Here's another look at the phone side by side with the back housing removed, and I'll go ahead and label them to make it easier to track. So taking a look at the location of the flex cables for the batteries, they are identical to one another. Looking at the batteries side by side, they pretty much look identical, aside from the labeling. Now I'll go ahead and measure the physical size. The 5,200 mAh battery has a length of 96.8 mm, compared to the 7,100 mAh battery, which pretty much has the same length at 96.7 mm. As far as the width, we're at 65.5 mm, with the same exact width of 65.5 mm on the 7,100 mAh battery. As for the thickness, we're at 5.4 mm versus 5.2 mm on the 7,100 mAh battery, but pretty much identical in physical size. As far as the battery connectors go, those are the same on both batteries. So aside from the labeling of the batteries, they both seem to be the same identical battery, but I'm not an expert when it comes to the internal structure of the batteries, so I can't pass any sort of judgment there. But if the larger capacity battery is using a different internal material compared to that of the smaller capacity battery, the overall size, flex cable orientation, as well as connector type, qualify to properly fit in the phone. So if you were to take this larger capacity battery and replace it with a smaller capacity battery in the phone, so far we're looking good. Now that the larger capacity battery is in the phone which had the smaller capacity battery, we can go ahead and power it on and test it out. So the phone powers on and works fine. We can see the charge level of the battery on the top corner, and there aren't any issues with the phone picking up the battery or any warning signs. As far as charging goes, we can see that the fast charging is working. So if in fact these batteries are different and not just labeled differently, then you would be able to take the 7100 mAh battery from the global or India variant and place it in the variant or version of the phone which is sold in the EU or European Union. But the general facts come down to this. As long as the battery has the same connector type, the same flex cable orientation, is able to fit in the battery compartment, or the housing is modified to allow it to fit, as well as the fact that there are no software locks or software restrictions, and the subboard or charger port board is still able to charge the battery properly, then you will be able to use a larger capacity battery and upgrade or replace a lower capacity battery in a smartphone. But again, the chances are rare of finding a battery which will meet all those criteria unless you run into a situation like this, where there are two separate batteries which are designed and made to work with a certain phone, which is sold in different parts of the world. Now what's interesting is that we have the 7100 mAh battery inside of the phone which had the 5200 mAh battery. However, when running an app like AccuBattery to check the battery capacity, it still only shows 5200 mAh, which leads us to believe that the phone is software locked. So even if there is a larger battery in there, the phone will only show 5200 mAh. Even trying it with a different app, we still only get 5200 mAh. So for my conclusion, I think they might be the same exact battery, just labeled differently, and a software lock or programming, which makes the phone show that it's only 5200 mAh. Again, I don't have any special tools to test the battery manually, without it being inside of the phone, to be able to tell if there's any capacity differences physically. Just to be sure, I did a factory reset and tested the battery capacity again, but there was no change. The phone still read the 7100 mAh battery as a 5200 mAh battery. So in conclusion, the phone software on this phone will only read or show the 5200 mAh it's programmed to, regardless of the fact that you may have put a larger battery in. As far as the two batteries go, to me they are the same exact battery with a different label placed on them. It's possible the phone software will only allow the battery to be charged to a certain capacity, limiting it to the regulated watt hours or 5200 mAh it's rated to, thus being the reason it won't show the full 7100 mAh it's capable of holding. One thing I didn't try was flashing the firmware from the variant which had the 7100 mAh battery to the phone which had the 5200 mAh battery to see if it would bypass any restrictions. I'm not too versed on firmware flashing and bootloader unlocking, so I'll leave that up to someone else who may want to try. Keep in mind though, when flashing firmware, you may lose some features and may have compatibility issues with certain network bands due to hardware differences with the subboard antennas and so forth. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.